This path is a progressive path. The Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught, often he taught it in a gradual manner, in progressive mode. He did it to allow the mind of the listeners to slowly become acclimated, to prepare the mind slowly. And of course, it differed from the capacity of the listeners from one setting to the next. He did so whether it was a group of listeners or if it was a singular person. We have countless examples of this in the Nikayas, in the suttas. We often forget to have that same attitude with ourselves as we sit to meditate. In our culture, where we want to have things very quickly, in an age of microwaves and fast food and things that we can have at the touch of a button, or at the latest to be delivered to us the next day, less than 24 hours in some cases. It is no surprise, therefore, that we have developed the same attitude towards ourselves and what it is that we want to experience or attain, or the purpose of our sit, of our meditation. So often when we're sitting, we're not sitting with the purest of hearts. We have many agendas. On one end, we are trying to purify the mind, we are trying to cleanse the heart, we are trying to clear the air. But that's like cleaning or wiping the windows with a dirty cloth that is so smudged with oil and gunk and dirt. And the cloth here is a synonym or a metaphor for wrongfully placed sati, or sati that is crooked. Because even though we might even be trying so hard to stay on our meditation object, whatever that object may be, we do so with the avid collaboration of lobha, dosa, and moha, the three poisons, the kileshas. We want to get things done. We want to attain something. We want to achieve even the calmness of the mind. That is an agenda. That is not coming to the table with a pure heart. Even in our human relationships, we know that if we come to the scene with so many expectations, it's not going to bode well. It's not going to turn out okay. Because we have some agendas. We have things that we want to attain, to achieve. And so long as we have that kind of an attitude, the heart is not in the right place. Why? Because sati is not there. Or even if it is, it's so crooked. It's dirty in a sense. It's dull. Perhaps that's a better term for it. It's dull. It's not sharp. How do we know if we are on the object of meditation with kileshas or without? That is the job of panya. That is the job of panya. Sometimes called sampajanya, sometimes in English we call it clear comprehension. Sometimes we call it by the 7 factors of awakenings, second, which is Dhamma vichaya. All of which denote clearly the laser sharp, powerful, magnifying glance of wisdom. But it will never take place. Wisdom will never open an eye. Even an eyelash won't be moved if there is no sati. Sati is the one that opens the doors for panya. And that is why we sit to meditate. That is why we have to carry mindfulness with us. In the different postures we go through of the body. The last 2 weeks we talked extensively on the breath and the importance of the breath. But it doesn't just have to be the breath. Anything that we become cognizant of, anything that we become aware of, is a wonderful opportunity to practice mindfulness. To use that as a conduit, to use that as a doorway for wisdom to shine. Now, nowhere in that formula did you hear me mention anything about let's have this extra desire somewhere, the goal. Of course, the heart has the intention to understand. That's why it came to the Dhamma. That's okay, we can work with that. It's a seed that's dropped inside the heart. Don't worry about it. As long as we are doing the rest of the work, we are nourishing it, we're watering it just appropriately, sufficiently, catering to it, protecting it with sati and sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Until it becomes so steady, until it becomes so continuous, where even when you get up from your dinner table or walking or bending down to lift something, all of a sudden you notice something that is unusual. It's quiet. And you're aware. You're aware of, if you're tying your shoelaces, suddenly you're aware of how the fabric feels of the shoelaces. Or if you're wiping something, or folding your clothes, or making your bed, or moving a chair, or getting in your car. Anything. Suddenly you become aware of the spaces in between objects, yourself and the other entities around you. The sounds. Suddenly the birds singing is no longer just a singing of birds. You notice, what is that's a sound. That's a sound. just a sound. You're touching something, all of a sudden, it's a touching. Slowly, slowly, you own your perceptions. You become more able to stop yourself from being pulled into the thing. That series of songbirds, or the singing of birds, no longer takes you on this carousel of memories, spinning, taking you deeper and deeper into some time period other than here. Instead, your mindfulness and your clear comprehension start to situate you better and better and better into this present moment. And that's another reason why we sit. But we have to make sure, again, that the reason or how we are sitting, how we are with our meditation object is the right reason. I didn't use plural, if you noticed. The right reason, not reasons. Because the more we add onto the plate, the more complicated it becomes, and the more agitated the mind becomes. The heart isn't stable anymore. And if the heart is not stable anymore, forget about wisdom. Forget about us developing and going deeper into the practice. This path is about understanding, but that understanding has to come when the heart is steady. That's why upekkha is essential for anyone who wants to become an arya, a noble disciple. We need to experience upekkha. Without it, it's not possible. But how can we do that? If we have this whole laundry list of things, okay, I need this, I need this, I need this to happen, I need this to happen, and I need it fast. Sometimes students come to meditate and they have, an agenda, as we said, and they have a timetable. We have to get to this by next month. Now, that's a good attitude to have if the person is thinking about death. How fast it could come. So I'm not going to miss any opportunities. There have been many cases where students came and approached Lord Buddha with that intentionality. And that's a beautiful thing to have. That's not what we're talking about here. Coming to the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, has to be coming from a pure place in our hearts. Why? Because we are dealing with the heart, after all. It's not just a mental thing that I want to attain. It's a very ambitious oriented otherwise. And that is something that we see a lot. Millions of people, millions, if not hundreds of millions of people perhaps, around the world have been doing these 10-day retreats and things like that. I myself have done several of those as a layman years ago. It's almost like adding another item or two on your resume, your spiritual resume. It's a good conversation piece. It works well at parties. It also sets you apart from others who are not, or who have not done it. But that's not Dhamma. Whatever we use wisely, if it has right view, if it is following the path of the Noble Eightfold Path, of course it's Dhamma. because the person who's doing it is functioning with the Dhamma. So it's not the method that is the problem. It is our approaches, or our approach towards these things that we do. Earlier I was mentioning about this path being a progressive, gradual path. So what we are tending to do often in our culture, especially now, is that we want to jump a few steps. Now you see where the kileshas are. They never left. They're just functioning under the guise, under the surface, under the guise of being somewhat spiritual, if you will, or wholesome. We can go through the routines, we can do pujas, we can do this. We need to know where the heart is. What is the intention behind me wanting to sit? So it requires us to be honest with ourselves. We don't sit to achieve some type of grandeur among other people, to some type of a status, seeking of prestige. In fact, blame or praise are going to be seen as the same. There goes the show. You're not going to have anything to write home about. We don't practice to gain respect from others. That comes from us. So we sit because we find ourselves discovering more and more beautiful things within us. And then it really doesn't matter how the world views us or not. Why? Because the heart is becoming less and less and less and less agitated. Why? Because we're taking good care of it. By the way, I use interchangeably whether it's the heart or the mind. In Pali, it would be something like mano versus chitta. Lord Buddha would use them both interchangeably. One of my late teachers, Bhante Candana, used to call it the cognitive mind and the affective mind. He was very psychology based. We would have interesting conversations. But coming back to the progressive or gradual path, Lord Buddha would start the person on introducing them rather to dana, the beauty of practicing generosity, to allow the heart to open, to allow the hand to open, to share your time with someone. That's also dana. To share what you know for the right reasons, again, not to show off, not to try to impress, but to truly share some things that are very, very personal in a sense, as far as discoveries, things that could help another human being, things that didn't come easy. You had to really pay high price for. And now you're really willing and able to share that. That is also dana. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Lord Buddha says, I gave you with open palms the whole entire Dhamma. He didn't hide anything. That's why it's ludicrous what later traditions of Buddhism said, oh, this is a secret teaching. This is Buddha gave it in a different form, in not a human form. It's a Sambhogakaya or Dhammakaya, or you have in the Mahayana and Vajrayana, you have all these things that never did take place. Lord Buddha never hid, never gave with one hand and kept the other behind him. That is not what a teacher does. He opens, gives them fully. That's a form of dana. So he would teach the students, the listener, especially those who were not part of the sasana, let's say. Those who had come from different sects that didn't know much about Lord Buddha's dispensation. He would teach them how the monks would go to the village for pindapada, but they wouldn't be begging. That's an opportunity for the lay people to gain merits, but at the same time, not just from the giving part, but also because they were about to get some Dhamma. Traditionally, that is how it's done. And as the person sees how there is a picking up and giving up on behalf of the recipient, in this case the monk, that shows a certain beauty, adds a certain layer of beauty, a different texture to this human experience, where it's all about going, getting. Especially now in this culture. So once the person has been introduced to dana, the beauty and the wonders that the whole experience of being generous brings to the person, then Lord Buddha would encourage the person to dwell on the virtues that they have. And if they don't have, it's okay. Lord Buddha would inculcate, bring out those qualities in them by encouraging that person to see themselves as able to take the 5 precepts, for example. And why the person takes the 5 precepts. After all, the person is protecting oneself from creating unwholesome situations, whereabout they will experience remorse and regret, which again does what to the heart? Shakes the heart, agitates the mind, and now the person cannot withstand themselves. They cannot stand themselves. The fears come up. Oh, I did this. The law enforcements are going to come after me. This is going to happen. Oh, I did this. I've taken this. I've killed a person, or I've cheated on someone, etc. So the person protects oneself, but also because they are developing these virtuous behaviors, they also protect those around them. We talk about the environment, climate change, this and that. Valid points. Okay, where is the mind? Where is the mind? For years, whenever I gave Dhamma talks, as a layman even, people would come to me with social justice issues, things like that. And I would always ask, wonderful, okay, but first make sure your mind is in the right place. Your heart is in the right place. Otherwise, what are you cleaning up with? The window. It's a dirty rag, smudged, dirty, oily. Most probably it's actually going to smudge it even more. It's going to make it even more dirty. Thanks to the addition of your introduction of your special, unique set of kileshas, under the guise of, oh, I'm trying to make the world a better place. That's why Lord Buddha would always come back to the sila portion of a person's education. Always. Sila is number 1. And that is a major step that we cannot overshoot, that we cannot just jump over and expect ourselves to develop somehow a mind that is pure. It ain't going to happen. It's impossible. That's why I always encourage students to, first thing in the morning, to take the precepts. Not just in the morning. Any time of day where they feel like something's not right, it's off, or one of the precepts have been broken somehow. It's a training rule. It's okay. We retake it right there and then. Clear the mind and then continue. Why? Again, ultimately, we need to get the heart to become more and more stable, not agitated, stable, calm, contented, appeased. Why? Lord Buddha says, Sukhino chittang samadhiyati. Samahite chitte Dhamma patubhavo. Samahite chitte yata bhutang pajanati. When the heart is contented, appeased, suddenly, naturally, the mind becomes collected. Samadhiyati. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to push. You don't have to, I'm going to sit through this. No. Have you ever held a bird in your hand? A live bird? Or a puppy, a newborn puppy? And you can feel their heartbeat, especially a bird. And they're so afraid, they're so scared. The heart is racing, and as you slowly with your finger, if you caress the feathers on its head, or just make her feel, oh, it's okay, it's okay. The heart rate can slowly become more regulated. That's what we're doing when we are meditating properly, because initially the mind is all over the place. But what we're doing with the bird, or the puppy, we are gaining its confidence. We're telling this being in our hand, it's okay, I'm not going to harm you. I'm not going to hurt you. Please trust me. That's what we're saying. Now, can we bring this attitude towards the mind, towards the heart? And having sati throughout the day with you is your way of making sure that your intentions are truly kind, because it's going to make sure that wisdom is there. Why? Remember, kileshas cannot be identified without wisdom. Defilements will only become clear if there is wisdom. Otherwise, our ambitions and aspirations, oh, I want to become a sotapanna, I want to become an arahant, I want to become a this or that, all those things will come and overshadow, and you're basically working the way you did all your life. Except that now you're becoming very sneaky. You use Dhamma language to cover it up. So let's avoid that. So there is a disarming going on. Disarming of all those negative aspects of ourselves. That profit-gaining attitude. I want this, I want that, I want this. That's why Lord Buddha would always start from dana, and then talking about the virtue. And then he would talk about the devas. Another thing that many Buddhist circles don't feel comfortable talking about. One is virtue. People don't like to talk about sila. Yet somehow they want to benefit. from the Dhamma. Forget about it. Nothing's going to come out of it. Nothing worthwhile is going to come out of it. Similarly with the Devas. These were not added later. These were not cultural nuances that were forcibly placed there in the suttas. No, none of that. But why? Why did Lord Buddha talk about the Devas or the other realms? To give you a better perspective as to where you are. If you're somewhere on the map, let's say, if somebody asks you where do you live or where are you on a road, if you're driving, traveling somewhere, in your mind you have a mental image of where you are located. You can, X marks the spot. That's where I am. You are here, as you see sometimes in buildings. It shows on a map. Okay. But in relation to what? Other places. During the past 20th century, late 19th century, Western philosophy has really done a number on us. That deconstructive mentality of radically going in and breaking things apart and just looking at things completely independent of other things, forgetting about the interdependence of things, of phenomena. Interdependence. So we have forgotten to look at the relationships of things. In order for something to exist, it needs to exist in relation to other things. And that poisonous way of thinking, granted, it has some benefits to it. Some. But it has infiltrated into the Dhamma, in the way we think. Not just there, it's also in relationships, and people have become so isolated in their thinking, vacuum almost, not wanting. It's reflected everywhere. Medicine, for example, is a perfect example of that. We try to deal with the symptoms, not the causes, for example. People come to you with problems, for example, as a therapist, and they point at the other person saying that is the problem. He or she is the problem, and completely remove themselves from the equation. Well, it takes two to tango. So that attitude needs to be closely regarded. So if I am feeling agitated, even when I'm sitting to meditate, take a step back, look at your attitude. What am I sitting with? Quickly do a scan of your mind, of your heart, just quickly. Why? Just asking the question why, it's so simple, can really unfold so many things that were going unnoticed. Because a lot is riding on it. Unfortunately, we never question. So questioning becomes a healthy thing here. Why am I holding on tightly? First, why am I feeling this agitation? Leads us to, I'm holding on tightly on this desire. Let's say I want to calm the mind. I want to relax my mind. Or how come I'm not able to reach that state of calm as I did last week? Okay, the stronger my grip is on this desire, the more I'm going to feel suffering, the more the mind is going to be agitated. Instead, to pull back a little bit and just accept what is happening, but with sati and sampajanya closely standing by, alert as to what's happening. And that is using the metaphor, the simile earlier, of you caressing the soft feathers of this bird in your hand. So only after the progression of going from the dana, then to the sila, the virtues of a person, and later the devas, who, by the way, I wanted to also add that using these earlier two steps of dana and virtue, you have the necessary qualities. If you allow them to prosper and to grow in your mind, and you definitely are recollecting those qualities in you at the moment of death, there are countless examples and instances where Lord Buddha says, you will be reborn in the heavenly realms. No ifs and buts about it. Unfortunately, many of us have our heads stuck in the sand like an ostrich, saying, no, 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 no. This life is the only one. I'm not interested in anything other than this life. Why? Why aren't you? So there needs to be a reevaluation of some of the nonsensical things that we tell ourselves. It doesn't show how smart we are. It shows how dumb we are, in fact. If it was good enough for Lord Buddha and his Arya Savakas, guess what? It is good enough for us. So we need to delve deeper into understanding them better, instead of completely shoving them aside and saying, no, 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 that's too passé, that's too, no. Otherwise, we're nitpicking the Dhamma according to our limited understanding of it to begin with. So there needs to be that humility, that openness, which once it has been established, and in the suttas you see this happen in one sitting sometimes, where Lord Buddha goes progressively. I think we came across in Upali Sutta, where Lord Buddha was teaching Upali, the layman, who was a follower of the Jains. And his heart opens. At that point, after he covers these progressive stages of the Dhamma, that's when Lord Buddha teaches the teaching of the Buddhas, meaning the Four Noble Truths. That is the teaching of the Buddhas. All Buddhas, the past, present, or future, will teach that. And that is how a person can become awakened. Experiencing Nibbana depends on their being available, the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. But the mind has already been prepared carefully by the Lord Buddha. So every time we sit with the right attitude, if we are incorporating Sila, Samadhi, Panya, we are doing the same process for ourselves. There isn't a physical Lord Buddha sitting there, but we are going through the same process of unlearning and learning, developing, letting go of the past. Adana patinisagga, picking up and giving up. And the changes that happen because of this is the transformative qualities that our practice can bring to us, to our mind, purifying it. And that is what changes a person, not going to some retreat, not attaining some state. What I care about is what happens during those moments between so-called attainments. What attitude do you enter your bathroom with? How is your mind when you're speaking with someone, when you're listening to someone, when you're sitting still, when you're tasting food, when you're drinking some water or something? Where is your mind? And how is it? What is the quality? Again, we come back to sati and sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. These are not just going to be there at the time of meditation. That is not their place only. We meditate so that we can ensure that sati and sampajanya stay with us during the rest of the time. The rest of the time. And that is what makes the practice successful for the person. Why? Because there will be personality difference taking place. And the person will know, the people around you will know. So I hope this has been of use to you. So I will pause here and open for any thoughts, comments, questions, again, about the Dhamma or the practice. Silence is nice too. Yes?
Thank you very much, Bhante. Could you share a little bit more about the Devas? I feel curiosity and because you mentioned sila, the virtues, the qualities, and the Devas, like the progressive way. And yeah, I feel curiosity about Devas right now.
It's definitely an area that deserves quite a bit of curiosity, or invites a lot of curiosity. Unfortunately, we've been told a lot of things growing up, especially if you're coming from, actually, it doesn't matter if you're just coming from a Western background, but even I've noticed this in Asia, people have fears, let's say, of things that are not human, things that usually it's just hearsay. People have said, like ghosts, for example. People are terrified of ghosts in many cultures without understanding what it is. And similarly towards the Devas, people worship the Devas. And you have countless people around the planet that do obeisance or pay homage and offer gifts to the Devas on a daily basis, appeasing the gods in a sense. As far as we are concerned in the Dhamma, with the Dhamma, both of these two are actually based on wrong views, those two approaches. What Lord Buddha introduced, thanks to his wisdom, was the fact that none of these realms are permanent, like everything else. They are impermanent. So you have different levels of devas. You have devas that are close to earth, and they're called earth devas. And in this tradition, you've come across them through the suttas, countless suttas, as I was mentioning earlier. But trees, for example, have devas and sometimes entire families living on them. And that's why one of the reasons why there needs to be respect towards nature, because we're not the only inhabitants. But if you come from a Judeo-Christian Islamic background or culture, we are taught that these are just there for our usage. Go ahead and use them as you see fit. That is completely wrong, a wrong approach, and destructive, in fact, and inconsiderate towards other beings. And I haven't even talked about animals, even though they're not devas, but still we have the same attitude towards animals in those cultures. But the devas that are on the earthly realms are the closest to us, in a sense. But the wonderful thing about deva realms is that if you recall from the Dhamma Chakkapavattana Sutta, which you weren't present, but it's recorded, so you can listen to it also. There are the different levels of the devas that get, when they hear about Anya Kondanya, the elder bhikkhu who has the eye of Dhamma, meaning he became a Sotapanna. It is the earth devas who become aware of this first. And they are chanting, they're rejoicing, because finally, they were rejoicing earlier because Lord Buddha became the Buddha. So it shakes the cosmos, because it's so, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but it has been such a long time until the Buddha has appeared. And now, not only has the Buddha appeared, but he's teaching the Dhamma, which is huge. Remember the Four Noble Truths I was saying, that is the teaching, the hallmark of Buddhas? He taught that, and there was much rejoicing. But especially after Anya Kondanya became a Sotapanna, they just were so exhilarated. They were so happy, and they chanted. Now, the next level of devas, hear this. And they happen to be the Chatu Maharajika, or sometimes they're combined together. And those are the four great kings, gods. And they don't live on this plane. The difference is, it's about our years, it's about 9 million years, their lifespan. If they live the whole lifespan, it's about 9 million of our years. And that is one of the shortest. As you go higher, it becomes progressively longer and more sublime. Their radiance becomes much more refined. The level of attachment to the five sensual pleasures, for example, becomes more and more refined until you leave the Kama Loka, where we live also, animals live. And many of these, about 16 of them, realms live, devas. So they have so much enjoyment. So there's enjoyment of sense pleasures, sexual pleasures, alcohol, all these things that are there. That's one of the reasons why the devas would come to Lord Buddha wanting to learn. Not all, some of them would come asking to learn the Dhamma, because they have done it all, they are tired of it, and most importantly, because they have had some work done in their past, with some association with the Dhamma. So there were some seeds in them. And that's another reason why a Buddha can only show up on the human realm. You won't find a Buddha appearing, being reborn in a Deva realm, or even Brahma realm, to become a Buddha there. So Siddhartha would never be reborn in any of these realms, because they cannot relate with suffering. There is no concept as you go higher and higher, because there's so much joy, there's so much gratification, satisfaction with pursuing all these things. So it becomes very difficult for the mind to comprehend or even to fathom the Four Noble Truths. Last year, for example, this doesn't have to do with the Devas, but last year I was traveling in Europe, and after what I had seen, in the Middle East and in Asia, in my travels, these people in those parts of the world really know, or even in parts of the United States, in parts of Los Angeles, you see people who are in so much suffering. So a person who really has an understanding of despair, has an understanding of not getting what they want, meaning not being lost in pleasures, they have an opportunity or some possibilities to lend an ear to the Dhamma. I know in my last year's travels, I would really have a hard time creating that sense of urgency in some of the listeners as I was going through Europe and in different countries. I would have people who would want to debate with me as to, why is it so wrong to seek after my pleasures? So if you have an entire culture based on pleasure, where you're completely encouraged to close both eyes when it comes to other realities, like death, for example, people don't want to talk about that. So they want to quickly cover it up with sugar, sweet, this and that, to make it go away. That is one of the reasons why you don't have such a strong root there yet. But it's changing, I'm glad to say. It's changing. So I use that as a comparison with the Deva realms, because it becomes very difficult for those beings, despite the fact that they live for a very, very long time, and once their credit runs out, they will fall. They will fall unless they have worked on their sila, samadhi, and panya. And you do have many, many devas who have attained the noble status. They have become Arya, Savakas. You have Brahma gods who are even Arahants in the pure abodes, living out the remainder of their lifespan. You have Devas who have reached the first and second stages of nobility. So even though they are in heavenly realms, you're not going to find them sneaking around and behind a tree and having sex left and right with this god or this goddess or this. They're not going to be engaging in any of those things, because they've penetrated the Dhamma. They have the eye of Dhamma. So that would be an interesting state to be in. So if you are thinking about sila, and then you're thinking about obviously your generosity first, and then the devas, especially at the moment of death, that really prepares, because the way Lord Buddha describes this in the Anguttara Nikaya and other suttas, it is an encouragement for us to be mindful of the devas, so that they also were human beings once. But because they followed the system, that's why Lord Buddha only teaches a system that works. It has a repeatability quality to it. And he literally mentions how these devas used to be you. in the same similar situations, but they worked on their generosity, they worked especially on their virtues. And when the time came for them to leave this body, they reappeared in a heavenly realm, but with the added bonus, and that is the Dhamma in their hearts. So I know that there was another question. Let me see. This is from, is it true that human beings are the only beings that can experience all the realms? This is from Mariano. Is it true that human beings are the only beings who can experience all the realms? I would say it's a tricky question, but yes, tentatively yes, because the reason why I am pausing there, it has to do with the 5 aspects of the pure abodes. Now, when we say experience all realms, being reborn into these realms, like I was saying, the reason why I hesitated, like yes and no type of a thing. For example, Siddhartha Gautama was born as a human, but he would not be qualified to be reborn in the pure abodes. So he would never get to taste being reborn there after being a Buddha, because the pure abode is only reserved for anagamins. It is off limits to anybody who is not an anagami. That also includes Mara. Mara can only dream about, can only theorize, hypothesize, have a bunch of conjectures about the pure abodes, off limits. So he can never be reborn. The only time a person can be reborn is if they are anagamins, meaning they have dropped the 5 lesser sangyojanas, or the 5 fetters. Those and or weakened the higher as well. So does that answer your question? Okay.
So only at a practical level, if I am reading a sutta and sometimes they appear, right? Even having a dialogue with the Buddha or things like that. What is the most recommended attitude, or like connection to the Deva or the Devas, like also in practice? Any recommendations?
Be very alert. Never take anything for granted. For example, they give gifts constantly. I know of someone who likes certain types of flowers, and it only shows up in the summertime. Now, because she has been practicing well, this student, and practices and keeps her sila intact, and has begun to open her heart to the Devas, suddenly, right outside her window, there's a tree that gives this flowers in the summertime. Just that portion of the branches, even though it's winter, suddenly those branches, just a few of them, became leafy. Not only that, but they started giving her her favorite flowers. Initially, she was not seeing this. She was just like, oh, isn't that that's very unusual. It is lovely. And then I had to ask some questions, and then you have to observe things that are happening around us, but we don't necessarily look at them with a wider understanding and a greater possibility. Another would be, some people say, oh, it's just positive thinking, or you're just using visualization, or you're law of attraction. All these things, they could have something to do with it, but usually you will sense something happen in your body. There's a tingling sensation. Sometimes people are moved to tears. Your heart suddenly opens. It brings down its shields. Its gates open up, which is another moment of a reason why you start tearing up, you start crying, and they're not tears of pain, they're tears of joy, and you don't know why. But the brain likes to associate that with some sanya, some memory, some type of a mental association. And there goes the whole acknowledgement, because you don't believe in devas, right? That's what the mind says. Now, for the devas, it doesn't make a difference. When we do the Brahma Viharas, it's called Brahma Vihara. Vihara means a dwelling, an abode, a place where someone lives, a domicile. Brahma are the higher gods. Their normal state of being, depending on which level you're on in their realms, there are different levels of Brahma gods. But the Brahma Viharas that we have, Lord Buddha taught us the four: metta, loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, altruistic joy; and upekkha, equanimity. Depending on the level of the devas, you're going to feel a similar frequency, especially if you've developed your practice deep enough. The deeper you have gone, and the more your heart is open, the less critical you are of possibilities, the more they will become pronounced. The more they will become pronounced. Again, this is not necessarily only a Buddhist, you have in different cultures. However, the different cultures, other than Buddhists, other than Theravada Buddhists, I would say, have this permanency or eternal attitude, eternalism advocated about them, and they're not. You have, just like every time you flick your fingers like that, you have millions of body cells dying inside of you, and millions more coming to shape, being born inside of you. Similarly, you have that many devas dying, dropping from those realms, and new devas being reborn in those realms. So how is that so far? Good. These are interesting to I wouldn't say, I know some people have said, these are just fairy tales, we shouldn't believe in them, things like that. I had one time a so-called secular Buddhist, whatever that means, because in my world, the way I understand Buddhism, you cannot be secular and a Buddhist, because that means you're taking out karma, you're taking out rebirth, you're taking out the devas, other realms. So no, that doesn't work. The Dhamma is the Dhamma. who am I to clip and make it my own version of it? That's a very arrogant and obstinate way of looking, and ignorant. So the Devas are there to inspire us when we study them. Some students have shown a lot of interest in wanting to see them, and etc. But depending on your subtle the awareness, your awareness becoming more and more refined, that's what I'm trying to say by subtle, you will be able to pick up. And there are different levels of Devas, and you have Devas that are very advanced in the Dhamma, who will come, if you are practicing, who will come to encourage you, and who's always, they have their antenna always turned on. If there's anybody talking about the Dhamma, especially if they are genuinely interested in learning, or trying to probe a certain question that they're not able to find an answer to. Sometimes these people feel like, that's it. Well, that just didn't happen like that. So as the person's awareness gets refined more and more, sometimes the heart says so, the mind develops. That's also there is that possibility. But what I'm trying to say is there are Devas who are willing and able and eager to assist us, and also to test us. If we carry ourselves and say, oh, I practice sila, oh, this happens a lot with bhikkhus, with monastics. Ajahn Mun was very critical of bhikkhus who would sleep in a disorderly manner, like a putujjana, an uneducated, uncultured worldling or ordinary human being, versus a sappurisa, someone who is a superior person. So he would say, always be mindful of the Devas, even while you're asleep, even when you're in your kuti. Don't walk around with your robes hanging like half, like your body is, your nakedness is showing or something. It's very disrespectful, because you are making some of the Devas lose faith in the Dhamma, in the sasana. So when we are walking around, we need to inspire not just other human beings, but also the Devas. Because you have Devas who have heard some things about the Dhamma from some friends, other Devas, and they're like, okay, let's go and check and see, explore these bhikkhus, these Buddhists. Who are these Buddhists? How well do they live? Because they want to make sure the person is really genuine. And the Devas, almost all of them, are able to probe into your heart. They can see your innermost thoughts and secrets. That's why they don't like to hang around people who are not real practitioners. Bhikkhus are not. But they love, once they find out that you are genuinely practicing, they will do all these kinds of things, like the flowers that are opening up on this portion of the tree. And the tree is intact, by the way. I've seen pictures of it. It's a healthy tree, but only one portion of the branches are giving green leaves and beautiful flowers. It's completely impossible. Especially because the sun is hitting not just that part, every other part of it, apparently. So there's different ways that we can become cognizant of the Devas, but the doorway to that cognizance, the way to pick it up, if you will, the signs of it, is through your heart, and the purity of your heart is the invitation for the Devas. And there is a chant that they particularly like, the Devas, and that chant has to do with the 4 Brahma Viharas. If you like, one time I will recite it, chant it, but it's available. It's and basically it's in Pali. It's so you're changing some of the words, but it's a repetition of the first verse, if you will, for metta, and then karuna, and then mudita, and then upekka. Brahma Viharas, they really gravitate towards that, especially when you are not just doing lip service, just like chanting words. You're feeling those emotions. Any other thoughts, comments? If you like, I can chant it now, actually. I see Greg's thumbs up. All right, I see more. It would be good if you would prepare the mind, and if you could do the hands in Anjali in front of your heart, imagine or just invite higher beings whose hearts are set on the Dhamma, and share the Brahma Viharas with them, with all beings, not just Devas, all beings, in all the 6 directions. Annamayang chaturapamanya bhasanang karomase metta sagatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tatha dutiyang tatha tatiyang tatha chatuthang iti udhamado tiriyang sabati sabatataya sabhavantang lokang metta sagatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena appamanena averena abhayapajena paritava viharati karuna sagatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tatha dutiyang tatha tatiyang tatha chatuthang iti udhamado tiriyang sabati sabatataya sabhavantang lokang karuna sagatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena appamanena averena abhayapajena paritava viharati mudita sagatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tatha dutiyang tatha tatiyang tatha chatuthang iti udhamado tiriyang sabati sabatataya sabhavantang lokang mudita sagatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena appamanena averena abhayapajena paritava viharati Upekha sagatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tatha dutiyang tatha tatiyang tatha chatutang iti udhamadho tiriyang sabbati sabbatataya Sabbhavantang lokang upekha sagatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena appamanena averena abhayapajhena paritava viharatiti. And let us close then with the sharing of merits. I'll chant it in Pali this time. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanagamahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti ettavata cham hehi sambadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya ettavata cham hehi sambadang punya sampadang Sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya ettavata cham hehi sambadang punya sampadang sabbe sattanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. And may your practice keep growing with authentic, genuine effort that is also kind and soft, but persistent, forgiving, allowing, yet pure, always working with sati sampajanya, always working and starting from your sila. Lord Buddha's path is alive. You will attain in this very life. He gave that guarantee. If we practice without changing anything, without adding or subtracting anything, we will taste the truth that is the Dhamma in our very life, in this very body. You can, before you die. And that is my hope, that you practice with perseverance and never give up. Always starting with the inner goodness in your heart. So, I will see you next week. And I will be covering Punnovada Sutta. It's an unusual sutta. It's a one that's very close to my heart. It's a beautiful sutta. Not a long one as last, but still, nevertheless, powerful. So I'll see you then. Blessings of the Triple Gem be with you all. Sukhi Hot.